Well, welcome, Nancy. Harvey, we're so glad that you could spend some time on your Sunday with us. We want to start off today with you sharing a little bit about who you are and how you came to be the owner of the Harvey Academy.
Yeah, it was an interesting journey and an unexpected one. 8 years ago, I decided to leave a wonderful private school in South Florida after being there 10 years for a variety of reasons. And I was just going to retire. I was just going to see what comes. I gave them notice before I even had a job, but I just knew it was time for me to leave for a variety of reasons. And about 3 months later, one of my parents at the time approached me and heard that I was leaving and asked me to be her homeschool teacher. And truly, my first response was, well, that sounds like an oxymoron. I don't even know what that means. I said, but I loved her children and I wanted to give it a go. So I said, let's try, let's research it. That was in March. So we spent the better part of the next 3 months researching what it means to be homeschooled and what my role would look like. And I made her, I convinced her to make her 3 children start in June because so they lost their summer. They weren't happy with me about that. But as a precautionary measure, I decided if this doesn't work out, because I really have never done this before, they can go right back to that private school in September and no harm done, and we'll just move on and part as friends. But it worked out very well. There were bumps in the road because we were figuring it out as we went along. And that was 8 years ago. And I started with 3 siblings. And now we have 44 students and a staff of 10. Yeah. Not what I planned. It just grew on its own accord, organically. Families found out what I was doing, and it just kept growing. Every year, I pretty much tripled my student body and took on staff. And I was in the private home of this family for 3 years. They built me a beautiful classroom on the water, but I grew out of it. And it was time for those kids also to go back to the traditional setting. And the oldest just graduated this year, and she's at FAU. And her sister's right behind her, straight A student. And so I took the plunge 5 years ago and got a storefront in Tequesta. And the rest is history. Now I'm taking on, growing again, taking on another 2,600 square feet for a total of 6,000 square feet at 1 Main Street in Tequesta. And I don't see the end in sight as far as our growth, especially because of the 2 of you.
Great. Quick question. When you were in the classroom before you started your own business, what were your favorite subjects and what was your favorite grade to teach prior to starting your own business?
I loved 4th grade, and that's how I ended my career at that school. I taught kindergarten too for 5 years, and that's fun, boy. That's where you learn classroom management because you are outnumbered by a bunch of 5-year-olds. Can't turn their back on you. Can't turn your back on them. My favorite subject has always been language arts and writing. I love history. Writing is very challenging to teach, but what you get out of these kids when you do it right is pretty awesome. In fact, that original family, the middle child, went to regionals in the Daughters of the American Revolution essay contest. I was really proud of her. She was 3rd in line for state champion for that contest. Wow. And she wrote it.
Right.
That's fantastic.
That's great. So in the 4th grade, did you teach every subject or did you split with another 4th grade teacher?
I taught everything.
So you had to do it all. That's very challenging.
Well, tell us a little bit about concierge education and what that means. It really is part of what makes you so fantastic and why people come to you. So why don't you share that?
It is. It came to me that the reason why I left the traditional classroom of 20 some kids and 1 teacher and a part-time assistant is that year after year there were always students that I never reached that would graduate, if you will, from 4th grade still not loving school. And that really weighed on my heart. I couldn't let it go. I just kept thinking there has got to be a better way to teach these kids. And physically I'm outnumbered. So to me, the logical solution was you shrink the classroom. So, and over the years, I found that a 1-to-6 ratio should be the max. And right now we're at 1 to 4.5. And then I thought, what is the sense of letter grades and pushing a child through the grade level as they grow when they're earning C's and D's and they're really not mastering it, especially with math, which is they're building blocks. They don't, if they don't understand long division, they're never going to get through algebra, or if they don't even know their facts, they can't get through long division. So it was quite frustrating. So the first thing I concierged, if you will, if that was a word, was the math program. When my students would come to me, I'd see exactly where they were. And often these students would come to me because their education was broken, because they had so many missing building blocks in their education. And because I started as like a tutoring center, didn't become officially a school until 2015. And that worked. I flipped the model where, no, I don't have 20 kids in a classroom. I have 6 or I have 8 at most, but then I have another teacher. But the planning is huge. I would spend 6 to 8 hours every Sunday planning for 6 kids because it was every subject. And not just because you're in 3rd grade math doesn't mean you're in 3rd grade math. You could be in 5th grade math. I wanted to reach not only the kids who were struggling too, but all the kids who were advanced. That student I mentioned that won the essay contest, she was so smart. One of those amazing kids that just had it all, everything. She across the board, she could manage so much. And she would get frustrated with me because I push her, because she was one of those students, and we've all had them, where they're so smart in their elementary years. They just look at the board where they're explaining something in math or anything, and they just get it. And they just sit there until the teacher's done, or they go on and they do the assignment before the teacher's even done explaining to the board. I pushed her, and she didn't like me for a long time, but I wasn't there for, to become friends. And she learned how to learn for the first time. And it was a struggle, but she benefited from it, I believe.
So I can imagine that reward of being able to reach those students with that broken education that you were speaking of, but also being able to provide an opportunity to push students where they needed to has been incredible. Would you say that that in any ways the pandemic has kind of been a good thing to kind of like adjust a student's curriculum to that level, or has it been more detrimental for you as you're trying to help those students in those different areas?
There's 2 sides to it. I believe the pandemic opened up some parents' eyes to, well, there is an alternative. And now I'm forced to find it because I work from home, or now I am working from home, and I need to figure out how we're going to do this because I'm not a teacher. So I definitely last year had families come to me that would not have normally even considered an alternative approach to education. And I think some of the families stayed because they thought, well, this is pretty cool, I mean, I don't let my students move ahead until they score 75%. It's unheard of. You don't do that. You got a D. Let's move on to another topic now. You just didn't get that. That's okay. We'll revisit it next year. And that doesn't work. So
yeah, I think that's something that we talk about a lot. And in fact, we were just out in the community yesterday. So many parents now, I mean, if you look at it in that perspective, recognize that public school is not the only option. It's a good option for some, but there's so many other forms that education comes in now. And I think parents like the idea of almost like the buffet, right? The idea of, okay, my child needs this, and we can pick and choose, and that you're able to provide that is pretty great. Right. Yeah.
Interesting. You mentioned, and I'm going to play on the theme again of broken education. I think by definition, when you have a bell curve, you are teaching to the middle. And that actually is not necessarily the best for kids at either end, right? You're, like you said, the high achievers or those that need more attention. They're both suffering. I find it just as sad when a kid gets sort of, let's call it socially promoted, right? That just sets them up for failure down the road. And just as bad as a kid who has really great potential and capacity, but they're so discouraged because they're never challenged, and they end up becoming your behavior problems because they're just bored. So I hear you on that. I also want to reiterate what you said about math, because I think math is the gateway to any job you want, right? No matter how whatever you want to do, if you're good at math, you have a shot at it. But I definitely agree. And I'll give you an example. My own family, I have some nephews and nieces, and I wish my siblings would help them achieve more, right? Because they have potential, but they're not being served. So I feel like that's sort of the niche that you found.
Yep.
And, now where do you see yourself heading with this organization that you have put your blood, sweat, and tears into?
Yeah, it is. I mean, aside from being a mother of 3 kids, this is my mission in life. This is my 4th child, hands down. It's what I live and breathe. Funny you should ask. Our daughter and her children and husband live with us now because they're saving up for a house, and it's impossible for a young family to buy a home in Jupiter, which is where we live. So she's trying to sell us on the idea of her buying a home in Westlake, and Westlake looks to be like the new Abacoa way out west. So of course I'm thinking, big community, young families, less expensive property. So I contacted the city of Westlake to see if possibly we could put a second location there. And this time I'm buying the building. I'm not paying any more rent. So that's my next step has to be buying a building and finding a space big enough that I can grow.
That's a really good problem, right? Like having to continually find something that's taking you in. Did you imagine, gosh, what did you say? Was it 7 years ago, 5 years ago?
This is my 8th year with the Harvey Academy.
Did you imagine that you were going to be thinking about expanding to locations and having high schools at all?
Sean, I can't tell you how many times I look in the mirror and I just start laughing. Like little Nancy Burke, that was my maiden name, Nancy Burke Harvey now. Little Nancy Burke, it owns a school. Like it just blows my mind. I'm humbled by it and I'm terrified by it, I'll be honest. And then I take a deep breath and I'm like, but look at my team, look at what we've done. And we're doing great work. We are.
Oh.
Failure is not an option. No kidding.
Well, I wanted to share the story about how we met you a little bit, and that will kind of pivot, I guess, to somewhat to how you're providing not only for those students who need to be encouraged and pushed, but you're bringing an entire track to your school. So I think that, gosh, Kevin, what was it, 4? Was it 3 or 4 years ago that we came to meet you through Mr. Sasser or Dr. Sasser?
I'm going to say at least 3 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was 3 years ago, December.
So imagine for our listeners, we're at another school and things were kind of going well there, but we knew that ultimately we were constrained. Our passion, of course, is we're working with these kids who love aerospace, and they love to not only do the work, but they like to talk about it. And then they would leave us for high school, and we would not only lose them, but they would lose their passion and their interest because they weren't getting that reinforcement. So
or opportunity.
Right. Well, right. Exactly. And so we have this parent who says, hey, you've got to meet this amazing educator. She's got a school. She needs you. And in walks Nancy Harvey. And I think we met at a restaurant with that parent as well. And I was so impressed with just in general how you've been able to not only you're teaching, but you're developing your business. I mean, it's not often that I find people who are like Kevin and the amount of work that they put in, but you're one of them. And I just remember thinking, I don't know how this door is opening or what the universe is like. I'm a big believer in those kinds of things. And so I'm really excited about sharing with you that I knew even then when we sat down, I was like, there's something here. So
I did work like a dog. This is my first week in 8 years that I'm not, and I'm not bragging. It's not something I'm proud of, but that I'm not teaching and managing a growing business, not just a business, but a growing business. So you're talking construction and more staff. And my dog is knocking on the door. Excuse me a second. Okay, Dunk.
It's Duncan. We get to see Duncan at school regularly. That's one of the big benefits of being at the Harvey Academy. All of our canine friends you get to visit.
But this is the first week I'm not teaching anymore. And I feel like a human being again, because I would live and breathe 7 days a week working. And I knew I can do it forever. But I always had my sight set for moving out of the classroom, even though I still love teaching. And I'm glad that I still have that student support hour with all grade levels, so I can still stay in touch.
Right.
But in order to grow, I need to stop teaching.
Right.
I can't be a superwoman. And I really enjoy the administrative part. I really do.
I don't know what part of the day is your sweet spot, but when you're in this, I like the fact that you're an entrepreneur, right? I like that. I feel like that if we can infuse that in our classrooms and really motivate the kids to look out there, find a problem, come up with a solution, that's good life training. I think no matter what they end up doing, be a good communicator, be a good teammate, and solve problems. So my question to you is, I like what I call the first fruits of the day, that first hour. If I can be by myself for an hour, I can get some really good stuff done and I feel really creative. What time of the day is your special
It's
time?
3 a.m. Am I right? I'm kidding.
What is your special time of the day where you're most effective at seeing the vision you want to lay out? And do you have some sort of time that you carve out for stuff like that?
I've always been a morning person. Sometimes that means 3 a.m. If it's 3 a.m., I try to go back to sleep, but not always. But absolutely the morning. Like this morning, I got up, I try to walk, and I walked on the beach this morning at sunrise, and that's just clears my head completely. And I find when I am walking, or not exercising for weight training, but when I walk for, when I'm getting aerobic exercise, that's when I'm able to just solve problems. So it's the morning, and if I can get in a walk that morning, I get a lot of cognitive exercise done, and I can come back in and say, oh, I solved this problem, I solved that problem, and figure it out. So it's always the morning. I'm useless beyond 7 o'clock.
Got it. Do you like rolling into work and seeing Miss Joe or any of your other teachers already there working?
That cracks me up. It's always start. I'm like, why is the door unlocked? I'm not used to that. I'm not. The worst is when I'm there on the weekends and she's there. I'm like, girlfriend, you were put me to shame. I'm kind of liking it. I guess I'm like actually am working a little less, breathing a little more. But yeah, it's been every year. I feel more and more excited and just inspired by this concept I have, continuing to grow, continuing to meet the needs of even more students. I started off with that family of very smart children, but over the years, and the reason why I felt like your program fits right in with my mission is, we start off with the whole math idea. Some kids, they're all over the place with what they can handle in math, regardless of their grade level. So I addressed that. And then dyslexia became, I met Susie Cooper, and it seemed like nowhere in our public system, at least in our county, if not our state, it's dyslexia addressed. So I'm like, there's another population I got to take care of, because my mission is, I want to offer students what they're not getting elsewhere. For dyslexic kids, they have Susie Cooper, who's this amazing tutor who's on staff full time. She pulls them out. She collaborates with the staff. We've got multisensory training for all our certified teachers. That's another thing. Every teacher's certified. There are a lot of private schools out there, teachers are certified. It makes me nuts. For the ADD, anxiety kids who are struggling because they're in a group of 27 kids and they can't understand what's on the board and they aren't heard and they're afraid to raise their hand. We've got our small venue. We've got our 1-to-4 ratio. They can't hide, and we address their needs. So that addresses ADD because there's less distraction because it's a smaller venue, and the anxiety. I've got Mrs. Heyman, who's Mama Heyman, and they go and talk to her when they need to, and then they get right back to class. For the advanced kids, I get to move them up. I do whatever I want with your, approval or your inspiration. We just, as you know, moved a 7th grader into 8th grade math. I love the fact that I can do that I can offer 8th grade students, 7th grade students high school credit if they're qualified. I have to approve, but why not? This is all how we get these kids inspired to realize that, learning can be fun and absolutely rewarding and a lifetime commitment. The extra help, Dr. Wall every afternoon can help with science and math, and they're struggling with Kevin's lesson for the day, or Miss Simmons. Sorry, Miss Christensen. Because Dr. Wall has taught, she teaches everything. She's amazing. And I'll sure, so AIA fell right into that, because eventually, maybe even next year, if we get enough students, we'll be able to offer these kids that love aerospace engineering a high school program that you can't get anywhere else in the country.
Right.
So your program fits right in with my mission.
I see a great opportunity for us. Well, in this first month that I worked with these new students, there's three themes I really want them to really see. And I think it lines up nicely with you. One, let's reduce their fear and anxiety of doing new things and even hard things. Two, how do I, help build their self-confidence? And most importantly, how do we help them become their own best self-advocates? I feel like that covers a lot of, that will help students in any number of ways. So I feel like those themes are good. I've been trying to utilize those, and I see where there's a lot of room for us to make a mark there.
Yeah. And I'm really excited too about the idea of being able to continue the work with the students that we have had, that will be able to forge these relationships with the new students. And as you said, eventually we'll be right there with a place where we start working with students and they can kind of continue on with us. And that really has been our goal as well. So before we ask our final question, which is always like to kind of give us their advice, I know that there's been some challenges bringing us on too with students who were already a little bit reluctant perhaps, but what do you see as the benefit of helping even some of those more from the broken educational aspect to kind of be motivated and pushed in a loving direction? But, I know that we come with some of those issues perhaps. How are you handling that?
Yeah. Well, thank goodness I'm not teaching anymore. And they come to me, and I always tell my students and my staff, I hope you know this, that I will always listen. So especially my veterans who've been with me for years, I believe they know they can always come to me, even if they want to complain about a teacher, because communication is the answer to all things. There's always, and I always say there's always a solution. It may not be what you want, but every problem has a solution. So I've always felt, and I've tried to drum into their brains, communication. Come and talk to me. I will listen. And then we will work together because we're a team. Your problem is my problem. Your problem is your teacher's problem too. So we all play a role in it. You have to acknowledge your role in it, and then we'll figure out a solution. And most of the time we do. I have had to expel students who made choices that were not acceptable, nor was I able to find a reason to keep those students in my school. They just didn't belong. And because I tell all these kids, especially the ones that come to me because of anxiety and so forth, this is a safe place. If you bring in behavior that isn't safe, be it verbal, physical, whatever the case may be, even if it's regarding the internet, you will leave. You will leave, because this is a safe place. Everyone needs to feel safe. So,
well, as we close out today, I'd like you, if you had some imparting words for like any parents or students who may be on the fence about, I got to make an academic choice. I'm really not comfortable in the school that I'm at. And kind of tell them a little bit more about why they should consider the Harvey Academy or the Aerospace and Innovation Academy at the Harvey Academy for the future.
And let me just add, or parents that are maybe needing an alternative to homeschooling.
Yes.
Like they've homeschooled, but they need to move away from that. Let me just add that.
Yeah. Well, that's how I started, right? I homeschooled students and I was a tutor, and then I was a tutoring center, and then it became a private school. I think the Harvey Academy, granted, has my name on it, but I think the Harvey Academy is definitely a place you need to check out if the traditional classroom is not working for whatever reason, because chances are we can make it work. And I can't tell you how many students have come to me over the years not liking school. Either they were afraid of it or they hated it. And I turned them around, not just me and my staff and my puppies and the environment that is so nurturing, but demanding and structured. So if for whatever reason that traditional classroom is not enabling your child to thrive, you need to check us out.
And I would add, if you're looking ultimately for one that does challenge your student who's looking to be interested in engineering and aerospace, that we look to be able to utilize this same space where people can find their passions, but also for who might want that rigorous approach to education. So that's where we'll come in. And I'm really excited about that opportunity to work together. Well, thank you once again for spending your afternoon with us. And I guess we'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early.
Bright and early. Let's see who gets there first.
It's a challenge.
Thank you very much.
It is. All right.